What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Young Rich Podcast. Today, I am welcome and joined by my friend Seth. Say what's up to the people, Seth.
Hey, what's good, guys?
Yeah, say a little bit about yourself. Tell the people about yourself. Let's go. Let me hear something.
Yeah, so I'm a recent graduate at Baylor University. I'm currently studying medical science and going to get my master's and then hopefully med school there. I'm a pretty big sports head, so I'm really hyped that Richie let me get on the podcast today. We're going to talk a lot about some interesting stuff. My teams are the OKC Thunder, who have done pretty well this offseason, the Steelers, and then the Pirates. So, yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Paul Skeens.
Well,
yeah. I was going to say, I've been taking his case over his case since he came into the league, and it's been automatic, bro. That guy's actually super nice. I'm not gonna lie. Big pick up, you guys. All right, but like you said, we are going to talk about OKC today and a lot of the NBA offseason because obviously the NBA offseason is very quick. We pushed this podcast back about a day just because free agency did start yesterday. So we'll be discussing a little bit of the draft at the end of this episode as well. But first things first, we want to talk about OKC. Obviously, we know they traded Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso, which in my eyes was a very win now move. You got a very elite perimeter defender and a guy, Alex Caruso, who just previously shot 40% from three, which is something that team really needed. And obviously, you just signed Isaiah Hartenstein early this morning, late last night, for a 3-year, $87 million deal. And since it is your team, I'm going to let you talk first. I'm going to let you take your take. How do you feel about these two moves in particular for your team?
Yeah, so coming into the offseason, a lot of OKC fans, they had to go through that Mavericks series where SGA kind of carried the whole Thunder team. There wasn't a lot of secondary scoring from anyone besides SGA, maybe Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren in there sometimes. And Aaron Wiggins, a big role player coming off the bench for the Thunder literally the whole season. Obviously, Josh Giddey kind of just tapered off in the playoffs there. His role that he was drafted into was more so a ball dominant guard. We know that he's pretty good when it comes to playmaking and things like that. But the way this Thunder team is kind of shaped out the past year or two after Giddey's been drafted, it's a lot of ISO ball with SGA and kind of just letting him create and space the floor himself and kicking it out to, Chet, also getting Jalen kind of working on the pick and rolls, obviously, to Chet as well. And there's not really a role for Giddey on the team anymore, really. And as a 21-year-old guard, he'd probably be a top 5, if not top 3 pick in this draft this year. He's still only 21 years old. He was the youngest person ever to, get a triple double. He's going to be a star. And I think this trade worked out for both teams. A lot of people were really shocked that, the Bulls just gave up, they just gave up Caruso for only Giddey in exchange. But this is kind of like
OKC, sorry to cut you off. OKC had so many picks. Yeah. They could have gotten 2 last year before the deadline.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what that really tells us about the Bulls right now going forward is they're probably going to be close to blowing it up with, getting rid of Caruso. And for me, with the Thunder drafting Topic and kind of just a couple other guys that aren't going to be huge, big win now guys, I feel like the free agency and that trade really helped kind of define their offseason. They're going to get those pieces around SGA to kind of help push him to the next level. He's already obviously a superstar, but, getting to that top 2, top maybe even 1 player in the NBA, he's going to have Alex Caruso, who the Thunder didn't really need too much help on defense. They had Chet Holmgren. SGA literally led the league in steals, which is extremely underrated. Not a lot of people realize how good of a defender SGA is, even though he led the league in steals and he averaged almost, I think, a block a game for a guard. He's super lengthy and he's great on defense. They're going to have SGA, who's already a proven defensive guard. They're going to have Chet Holmgren, who's averaging 2+ blocks a game. They're going to have Jalen, who's a great defender. They're going to have Lou Dort, who is also known for being really, really pesky. And then they're going to have Alex Caruso now. And I don't know how Alex Caruso is going to fit into the lineup. I don't know if they're actually going to start him or if they're going to start Hartenstein at the 4. I know Hartenstein's probably going to end up coming off the bench. The deal that they signed him to, a 3-year, $87 million contract, to me, it's a little bit of an overpay, if we're being real.
I think you had to because there were so many guys and teams in being big. The Lakers are one. We missed out on Jonas Valanciunas, who was somebody that we were supposed to get to come off the bench. And then, Hartenstein was someone that came up. The Pistons could have used some help. Nick Claxton was a guy that if he hit the market was going to be getting offered a lot of money. So like I think just because the big was so important this offseason, it was kind of like you had to overpay a little bit. But because you are the Thunder, where you're not really paying everybody just yet, you can afford to do that. And then it's a 3-year deal. You can kind of work around it in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm really happy about that. The additions, the Josh Giddey thing was kind of bittersweet. I was a real big fan of Giddey. Unfortunately, he had obviously those off the court issues and all that, but we won't talk about that. But the addition of Isaiah Hartenstein is literally exactly what the Thunder needed. They needed a big man, not a Chet big man. They needed a guy that was going to get in there. He was going to get nitty gritty. He's going to be, one of those guys that has a fuller body. He's 7 feet tall. He's going to get those rebounds that, OKC really struggled with in the offseason. And, bringing in more people like Caruso and obviously re-signing Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe, which they did, which are a couple of the key role players coming off the bench for them. They're going to have such a dynamic offense when it comes to spacing. And also they're going to be so good defensively. And they were already, I believe, probably a top 10 defense in the NBA already.
I think they were top 5, to be honest. I think they were top 5, like in that mix.
Exactly. So it's gonna be really exciting next year for the Thunder, and that's not even taking into account that they have 5 first-round picks in next year's draft, which is absolutely insane. I don't know what they're gonna do with those first-round picks, because I really would see that, like, come trade deadline, depending on where OKC is in the standings, they might make a really, really aggressive push for a big guy to push into the playoffs.
Like a dominant big type. Well, listen, I mean, hypothetically, you think about it, but like Giannis is a guy that if he's not happy in Milwaukee, that could be a guy. You have so many picks. Obviously hypotheticals at the moment, but that's definitely someone. But I totally agree with the Hartenstein pickup. I mean, if you look at the playoffs last year, specifically in the finals as well with Dallas Mavericks, when Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford were outperforming you and out-rebounding you, they were winning those games. Like, it came down to who was getting the offensive boards, something that Hartenstein does a great job at. I believe he averaged like 4 offensive rebounds a game last year, especially in the playoffs. Right? But when you get a guy like that who can just help you out and allow Chet to shoot the 3, which makes him so valuable, a guy like Wemby, we talked about Wemby, how great he is to be able to space the floor, a big man who can shoot the 3, but Chet was doing it at such an efficient clip last year that people, I don't think, give him enough credit for, because, obviously the comparisons was Chet to Wemby all the time. It was like Wemby is just on a different level, but Chet was just so great at playing that number 3, number 2 role on certain nights, and like you said, everybody on this team is so young. J-Dub, I love him as well. He had his moments in the playoffs. Chet had his moments in the playoffs. There was a couple key players that, specifically Carson Wallace, that had a struggle shooting the 3 in that Game 6 closeout game, right? Adding a guy like Caruso, I trust Caruso to make those types of shots, those type of timely buckets you need, And Caruso is regarded as one of the best, like a winner, one of these best perimeter defenders, and one of these players you have on your team, he's going to win games. When he was on the Lakers, he played such a crucial role on that team, whether you wanted to admit it or not, and then he ended up getting paid a big bag by Chicago and eventually took off. But, I mean, I 100% agree with you. SGA, in that series against Dallas, the Dallas role players took such a crazy leap. Like, dude, you had Derrick Jones. People were saying Derrick Jones was an elite, like, 3-point shooter, You had P.J. Washington. Everyone's saying, this is what he came here to do, right? And then you seen them both shit the bed in the finals, so I feel for you because you were so close. I mean, SGA was playing better than Luka Doncic that entire series, offensively, defensively. He's one of my favorite players. I think, you just can't stop him. And when you have that type of spacing, you have a guy like J-Dub who on his best night can give you 19 to 21 points, alongside SGA, and he can shoot the 3, and then also last year you had 7 or 8 guys shooting above 40% from 3 halfway through the season, you know what I'm saying? So this team is so young, so talented, and I know with all the draft picks OKC has, people want you to go out and make an aggressive move, which I wouldn't. I mean, again, if you could get somebody like an elite level player like Giannis or, possibly an Embiid, AD like guy, that's definitely something I would obviously 100% be happy with for OKC. But I wouldn't rush anything with this whole process just because if, for whatever reason, if you have to cut a few guys, you have so many picks that, you could either package a couple picks to get a couple players here and there. But I think this team is just so set for the future. You got your star, you got your superstars, like your 1 through 3. They're set. They're on rookie contracts, So I expect big things from this team, and I expect big leaps for them this year. Like I know last year they were #1 seed in the West, but I expect them to be better. I hope SGA gets that MVP nod this year, because I did think he was arguably the best player on the best team, and he led the league in steals for a guard, or just in the league in general. So again, I have high hopes for this OKC team. And then back to the whole Josh Giddey situation. I do think Josh Giddey still has some life left. I think going to a team like the Chicago Bulls, a team that don't really know which direction they're going in, right? You hope that they don't re-sign DeMar. You hope that they could possibly trade Zach LaVine somewhere, for something, right? But you just drafted Matt Bazelis. You re-signed Kobe White, who was almost most improved player this year. So you've got some pieces. So I hope for Josh Giddey to become a NBA starter talent. Because I do still think he is very, very young. Like you said, he came into a team that just all of a sudden went from being one of the worst teams in the league to all of a sudden they're the top team in the West. So it was just everything was just so rushed. Nobody expected SGA to take this big of leap, but by this time, into the MVP conversation. So again, I think this is great for both sides. Josh Giddey gets a chance to do something. Obviously, you would like to see Chicago get some sort of draft capital. If instead of getting Josh Giddey, I know a lot of Chicago Bull fans and fan pages were talking about how they got no picks or Alex Caruso when they could have gotten 2 last year. So but that's just so very Chicago Bulls like at this current moment. Right. But another team I did want to get into is the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, they just signed Paul George to a 4-year, $212 million max extension. Tyrese Maxey just got his 5-year, $204 million extension. You re-signed Kelly Oubre 2 years, $16.3 million, right? And at the end of the day, this entire 76ers team is running it back, right? And me personally, I am never worried about the 76ers, specifically because Joel Embiid, right? I mean, Joel Embiid is just a guy, get to the playoffs, whether he's going to be injured going into the first series or he's just not performing. I'm not scared of them in the East, like I've never been. And then Paul George in particular, again, that's another guy that I just don't think he's like a winning player. That's why he had to go play alongside Kawhi, and even then the injuries just kind of got up to him. I do have a lot of faith in Tyrese Maxey. What he did in that Knicks series in the playoffs was remarkable. I mean, he just jumped to an all-NBA type player level out of nowhere. But how much faith do you have in this Philadelphia 76ers team going forward?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I think the number one question is just going to be health during the season and going into the playoffs. I don't think anyone's questioning if this team's going to be a playoff team. They're obviously going to be a playoff team. They're going to be competitive, very competitive in the East, obviously. The thing with me is that PG's getting older. This contract is massive. It's like $50 million a year. It's pretty insane. And I know Paul George is one of those guys where he headlines a lot of teams. Like, when you think of someone like the best player on the team, when you thought of the Clippers, you think of Kawhi and Paul George, and how when the Clippers had originally gotten Paul George from the Thunder, how this was kind of supposed to elevate them to another level of, they're going to consistently make the Western Conference Finals, or they're going to get into the NBA playoffs and things like that. And sometimes guys just don't mesh. And it was the whole Thunder squad with Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and Paul George. I mean, I was ecstatic about that whole pairing, but it literally didn't work. It didn't work at all whatsoever. And I mean, looking at this 76ers team, the main guy, I think, for them, obviously Embiid is their best player. Embiid's like a top 5 player in the NBA. I mean, we could obviously argue over other guys that can maybe sneak into the top 5, but I mean, Embiid's Embiid. He dropped 70 on Wemby. I mean, I don't think there's another guy that can drop that many points against a guy like Wemby. And he's just so dominant. He's like this. He's basically this era's Shaq. He's so dominant when he plays. You see him and you're like, how do you even stop him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the huge thing about the 76ers every year is just the health. How long is Embiid going to be out when he gets hurt? Or if Maxey gets hurt, how long is he going to be out? And then you have role players that are stepping into or bench players that are stepping into roles that, they're not accustomed to. And it's going to be health for them. It's going to be health. And it's also just trying to figure out how Paul George meshes with this team. And obviously we saw when Embiid was kind of absent, when he was hurt throughout the year, we saw Maxey go on absolute tears. And then when Embiid kind of came back, they were kind of trying to figure it out amongst themselves, how they were going to distribute the ball and how they were going to kind of get both of them to get into their bag in the same game. And I feel like with the addition of Paul George is a pretty dominant. He can shoot, obviously, off the catch, but the same thing. He's kind of a ball dominant guard. I mean, he's a forward, obviously, but he's one of those guys that excels with the ball in his hands. And I feel like Maxey, if anything, would probably be the one who adjusts his role to more of a spot up shooter more than he was a playmaking kind of space creator last year. But it's really exciting. I mean, I bet there's a lot of 76ers fans who are probably really hyped right now, just trying to think about their future and what it looks like in the future. If this Paul George thing does not work out, Paul George is obviously aging. He's well into his 30s. That $50 million a year is going to be almost untradeable, especially if he does not work out. So that's just the only scary thing that I would say for the 76ers. This is definitely a win now move. They're trying to compete with the Celtics. They're trying to get in it next year.
Yeah, and like you said, about the $50 million if it doesn't work out. I mean, look at Zach LaVine, right? I mean, he went on an absolute tear, was, 27 points per game that season, I believe, when they signed him this type of contract, and then now nobody wants to touch him because of injury concerns, because of the fact $50 million for a player like Zach LaVine, who comes to your team, he's like a 2 or 3. But when discussing, I 100% agree, it's a win-now move. You're not going to invest this much into somebody, like you said, an aging superstar, a guy who has been he's wanted to win. He went to LA, go play with Kawhi. They wanted to win, and obviously didn't work out due to health concerns, right? So health is obviously their biggest issue. Like you said, Paul George as well has had his moments and years where you think, damn, this Clippers team looks so good right now. They finally put it all together, and then as soon as they find some momentum, that 1-2 months goes by, the next thing you know, Paul George is out or Kawhi Leonard's out for the rest of the season, right? And the same thing with Joel Embiid, and he's not getting any younger, right? I mean, we thought that he wasn't going to replicate that MVP season. I mean, before he got injured, was averaging, 37 points per game. Like you said, was the most dominant player in the NBA this season up until he got injured. But I do think that having a guy like Tyrese Maxey, you're going to, after what we just seen from him, of course, being the playmaking slasher, right? The quick step guy who can get to the basket at will and just create for his teammates, right? And what he did without Joel Embiid, I do believe they will try to put more regular season pressure on Tyrese Maxey, to allow a guy like Paul George to kind of ride the coattail in the backseat a little bit and kind of save yourself for the playoffs, not give so much so that way you can make sure you guarantee your health and things like that, right? And same thing with Joel Embiid, right? Joel Embiid, he had something to prove last year, so you've seen him come out and he was dominating at will. He was, like you said, 70 on Wemby. He was going for everybody, and he was trying to prove that he was going to get it done this year, trying to prove to the haters that he was going to play a full regular season and he was going to win another MVP and going to compete for a championship, and the next thing you know, his body just fell apart on him, right? So I do think Tyrese Maxey, being a young guy who hasn't had any significant injuries yet, can be the kind of, not going to say number one, but a I'm fucking blanking right now, right? But the more efficient, he bought more offensive workload compared to everybody else, right? Especially Paul George. So again, I do think this 76ers team has what it takes to compete for a championship. I mean, you're very deep in role players, right? Kelly Oubre is a guy who was averaging 14 points per game last year, coming off the bench to start the season and kind of finished with injuries. Finished the season starting in the lineup, and then you still have Buddy Hield, who's a generational 3-point shooter, right? Nick Batum did re-sign with the Clippers, but I'm not too worried about that, really. But I do trust, with how much attention Joel Embiid can get, causing double teams, and be able to dish it out to open teammates and to create for other teammates. When you have 3 guys like this that can do it at an elite level, this team can be very, very scary. One can argue that this big 3 is more talented than that big 3 in Boston between Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and KP, it can be argued, right? Just because with Jason Tatum, we've seen the struggles in the playoffs in particular, right? So, this team is right there. It's been right here for forever. You've had opportunities to take this next step. So I would much rather see these guys, allow the younger guys and the role players to step up a little bit and just get to the playoffs healthy and just deal with it then than having to worry about injuries all year long. Because if one of these guys gets injured, I mean, this team is just not going to be the same, obviously, right? Whether it's Paul George and his defensive is two-way impact, or if it's Joel Embiid, you know? So, again, like you said, their health is their biggest concern, but I do think this roster from top to bottom has the talent to go compete. You know, they've been competitive in these series, whether you get lackluster performances from Joel Embiid, you know, the shots just not falling. I think last year was kind of a good, like, series for Joel Embiid against the Knicks. You know, he had a couple great games against the Knicks, which, and for Joel Embiid, you just need some sort of momentum. You know, you've constantly been this guy who doesn't perform in the big moments, right? In the playoffs, right? So to have a series or just a couple games go your way against the Knicks, who possibly should have been in the ECF if they didn't fall apart with injuries, you know, it's some good energy. Now you just got to keep that momentum going. You're basically got this whole team together. You're running it back. You're adding Paul George, a great two-way player. So I expect big things for the Philadelphia 76ers going forward. But the next topic of discussion is today, obviously, Klay Thompson did sign a 3-year, $50 million contract to join the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks did lose Derrick Jones to the Clippers. Again, a guy we both agreed we're not worried about after that fluke of a series against OKC. But give me your thoughts on this pickup for Dallas.
I mean, I feel that the contract itself is so dirt cheap. Like only $50 million for a guy like Klay Thompson. I mean, I feel like if I was any team, I would have given Klay that amount of money. I mean, obviously he had probably one of his worst seasons this last season. Obviously, he's getting up there in age, came off a pretty big injury. And that playoff game was just horrid. That was it was one of his worst performances I think I've ever seen. And I felt for him. I really did feel for him. Klay's Klay. I mean, he's gonna bring some defense to the team. He's obviously gonna be the huge thing with Luka and the Mavs and Kyrie was that they obviously have Luka and Kyrie. Those are your two guys. And obviously in the series against OKC, they had PJ Washington and they had Derrick Jones stepping up, but it's like they didn't have that third guy. They didn't have that third guy that's going to get you those buckets that, you know, isn't a role player necessarily, even if he's like a little bit above average of a player. If you always look at all the successful teams, they always have that third option that you could think that is like just above average. He's a decent guy that could maybe get you 20 on a day or maybe even 30 on a day where, you know, and the Mavs didn't have one of those guys. They had a lot of really good guys that kind of molded and shaped around Luka and Kyrie, kind of just like letting Kyrie and Luka play off of each other. And then the other guys would kind of just fill in wherever they could. But now with Klay, they've got another guy who, you know, catch and shoot. I mean, off the dribble, off of screens, it's going to be crazy. It's going to open up the floor a lot more for Luka and Kyrie. And I mean, I really hope that Klay, I think even if Klay doesn't do well, the contract itself is so dirt cheap. And I mean, he'd be better than anyone else on that roster right now, just as kind of like that third plug-in guy. And he's going to bring you defense too. I feel like, I mean, you have to stay competitive in the West, man. Everyone is so competitive. Everyone's adding and adding and adding. It's insane. It's like you would think if this was like 5 or 6 years ago, the Mavs would be like a top 2, top 3 team. You know what I mean? But now we have like OKC, we have the Timberwolves, we have the Nuggets, we have the Mavs, we have San Antonio, who I'm really excited about after that Chris Paul transaction. And then you've got like the Pelicans, who added another guy too. Everyone's adding a third guy. Yeah. Everyone's adding a third guy to their team and maybe even a fourth guy that's going to get in there and he's going to compete and he's going to score points when, you know, they need points, especially like if it's just going to take a lot of the pressure off of Luka and off of Kyrie too. And them being such like great playmaking guards as well, Luka and Kyrie, it's going to open the floor up for Klay so much just because, I mean, in Golden State, don't get me wrong, Curry's obviously an amazing playmaker. He's one of the best playmakers in the league, but he was really the only playmaker on that team. I mean, you think about anyone else on the team. I mean, they were really guard heavy. They had like Gary Payton, they have Moses Moody, they have Jonathan Kuminga, who's a really good one. They had Andrew Wiggins, who was an absolute disappointment. And I feel like Curry being that main playmaker, he just by himself, it was kind of him carrying the load.
He had multiple 50-point games, but they lost.
Yeah. Yeah, which is pretty crazy. So I'm really excited for the Mavs. I think the West next year is going to be so exciting to watch. I feel like every single, even if it's going to be like a play-in team or an 8-seed team or one of those 7-seed teams, I feel like all of them literally have a shot to upset the other. It's going to be really, really exciting.
Because then you look at, like you said, like Steph Curry, right? They didn't even make it to the playoffs, right? They were a playing team, and now you have Wemby, who's just going to become creeping up. They're trying to build a competent team around Wemby. So you have, and the Rockets as well. The Rockets were a team that they were on a 11 game win streak, trying to catch the Warriors to get into that playing conversation. And unfortunately they missed out by a couple games. But there's going to be a lot of teams coming for them. To the fact that we could possibly have a MVP Steph Curry 3 to 4 time champion in not even making the play-in. There is a possibility that happens if they don't acquire anybody this offseason and no trades are done, and the roster's not improved. So like you said, that's crazy how deep the West is, especially because the East is complete opposite. Very top heavy over there. But I 100% again, I agree with you. Luka and Kyrie are obviously two of the best players in the league at this current moment, right? Kyrie is known as one of the best number twos, one of the best Robins in basketball. With what he did with LeBron in Cleveland, he tried to do stuff on his own and be the true number one, and his takes in Boston didn't work out, right? And so now he comes back, and obviously this team going from not even making the playoffs or even the play-in to making the NBA Finals was a huge jump in the right direction. But I think Klay Thompson, again, like you said, even if he's not the Klay Thompson that we remember, or the Klay Thompson from 2 years ago when you won a championship in Golden State. If you can just have somebody else that threatens your opponent to shoot, somebody else to scare the defense from that you could score, that's all you need at the end of the day. Because if you have Klay Thompson, again, just being the number 3 guy, he's not going to, hopefully doesn't put up crazy amount of shots, so hopefully you tone it back a little bit. Because, again, it's not like he's in Golden State. It's not like it's just him and Klay, or Steph and Klay, you're going to Luka Doncic, a very ball-dominant guard. Kyrie Irving, again, ball-dominant guard, right? And so it was – and then when you talk about the finals in particular, it was the Boston Celtics were going to live with the fact that Luka Doncic was going to beat them. And that's exactly what Luka did. Luka had a great series. They didn't let the role players shoot any corner threes. They said, we trust our defense to get enough stops on Luka. We trust our players on offense because how deep our team is. And that's exactly what they did. You had Derek White who had his turn, Drew Holiday who had his turn. Jason Tatum had off nights half the series, and they still ended up dominating the entire series, right? So, again, this team, like you said, needs somebody else to step up. I was hoping maybe Jaden Hardy was going to be a guy to step up and give them some sort of offensive production in the playoffs, specifically in the finals. It obviously didn't happen that way, but I think Klay Thompson, a guy where he can do it with the ball in his hands, he can do off-ball movement, all that type of stuff, and he still is at the end of the day. Even though he had a terrible season and efficiency from the field was a little down last year, he still shot 38% throughout the entire regular season, right? Which for Klay Thompson is fine, is solid. At the age he's at, I do think that last game against Sacramento, it just sucks to see that happened at that moment, right? Because obviously his stock was a little low, right? He wanted a bigger term contract in Golden State. It didn't happen. But I 100% agree with you. I've been having this guy for 3 years, $50 million is something that if, again, it doesn't work out, you could ship him off somewhere. Someone will take his contract just for his name alone, right? Somebody else will give him a chance. But I do think this team, again, I think having Klay Thompson and a 3-headed monster is just, like you said, something you need to compete in the West with how tough it is. DeJounte Murray just got added to the New Orleans Pelicans, so they are upgrading. All these teams are upgrading. OKC just got better, right? You're not going to be able to out-rebound them like you did last year, right? And also you've seen the struggles of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively when Luka and Kyrie couldn't create for them, right? So there's definitely a lot of questions, and having a guy who can kick it out to, who can shoot a contested shot, who's not scared to shoot from half court. He can basically shoot from anywhere. He's going to catch and shoot it. And we know Klay Thompson loves to put up his shots. So I do expect this team to work, and I do hopefully expect them to make a deep playoff run again. Hopefully all health stays okay, and Klay Thompson plays 75% of Klay. I think this team should be completely fine. And with the young players, Derek Lively, who blossomed this year, I expect him to take some strides. Again, losing Derek Jones, I'm not worried about. I still worry about the support cast outside of the big three. Like you said, the PJ Washington, right? Derek Jones, you just let go, but Tim Hardaway Jr. was a guy who couldn't get you anything in the playoffs. Luckily, they traded off him, so there's more cap space there to maybe pick somebody up. But this team still, I think, needs some consistent scorers. I don't know if it was the youth of the team once you got to the finals, because, I mean, look, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, they came from some of the worst teams in the league their entire career to the NBA Finals, so that's a big jump, and there's a lot of expectations and a lot of pressure to perform. So I don't know if it's the pressure that made them fumble last year, but I do think if you have another situation like that, you definitely got to change the. I would like to see them get a obviously like a KCP like player before he got signed to Orlando, right? Something like that, just somebody who knows who's going to be there in the big moments and who can get you timely buckets and who's going to play defense the right way. But with that being said, obviously, I do want to talk about the Los Angeles Lakers real quick. Obviously, the whole LeBron James max contract conversation, right? LeBron James says he's going to take a pay cut to bring in some mid-level exception guys, to bring in a guy like Klay Thompson, like Chris Paul, like James Harden, Jonas Valanciunas. Those were the names specifically that he had given to the media, right? But, I mean, listen, not getting a free agent, again, I'm not too worried, right? Just because, again, some of these guys could have been overpaid. Klay Thompson, again, I think that's somebody that we could have picked up. I think that's someone we should have invested the money in. I don't know if the money would have worked with LeBron and Klay and our second apron and all that stuff and the luxury tax, but I'm not worried. At the end of the day, being a Lakers fan, I'm not worried. This team that we were on, yes, we got stuck in the play-in last year, but that was also with, months and months of poor shooting. We did get Dalton Knecht from Tennessee, who was shooting 40% from three coming out of Tennessee, and alongside J.J. Redick, a guy who just needs some shooters. He needed to add some shooting, and he wants to excel Austin Reeves and Max Christie, which are 3-4 capable shooters. I do like the direction this team is going. I think we'll be better situated this year than next year because we'll be playing the right guys. With J.J. Redick coming through, a shooter, a guy who played a lot of off-ball movement, he's going to love playing with Dalton Knecht, even if he's coming off the bench. Austin Reeves is another guy who, he's a very six-man of the year type guy. Averaged 16 points per game last year, can shoot 39% from three. So that's another guy that we have that could really shoot. And at the end of the day, listen, if we're not going to trade for a Trae Young, which we've already said we're not going to, we don't want to give up our draft capital of the future going forward. I'm not too worried. I'm not too upset about it because at the end of the day, I understand LeBron James' win now window is now, right? He's not getting any older, or any younger. He's 41 at this current moment, 40. And even if he doesn't even re-sign to the Los Angeles Lakers, I'm not even going to be too salty about it. Why? Because we've been doing this thing. We brought in AD. We won a championship, right? We set ourselves up. We were looking great. We had Kyle Kuzma. We had KCP, Alex Caruso. We had all these guys. We were deep. We were low. We looked like the Boston Celtics then, right? And then we let LeBron do his thing, and he traded for Westbrook and kind of fucked up our future, right? We lost a lot of great young players. We got stuck. Our team was horrible. The spacing was horrible. So we did a lot of things LeBron wanted us to do. So LeBron, at the end of the day, decides not to re-sign with us. I'm not going to be too upset, again, at the end of the day, because I think we'll be fine going in a different direction, going in a more of a rebuild direction. I think we have some young guys who I would personally like to see get developed, get some more PT. A guy like Max Christie, who just signed to a 4-year deal, right? That's a guy who was shooting 38% from three his entire career, and he still just does not get enough PT because of the fact that we're always in a win-now competition. Everybody's always in trade rumors and this and that. And so, again, I'm not too worried if LeBron James doesn't sign or does sign at all. But, again, that's just me.
Yeah, I feel like, going forward, the Lakers, I feel like the huge X factor there is just going to be the health of Anthony Davis. I feel like I'm kind of just waiting for him to be healthy a whole season so the Lakers don't really get into this funk of one of their main guys is out for a little bit and then everyone else is kind of just plug and play and then they come back and then they're trying to mesh together with their chemistry and stuff. I think if they have just one healthy year together, I don't this team is really good. They have really good guys. They've got Anthony Davis, like you said, Max Christie, who's only 21, I'm pretty sure. And then you've got guys like Rui, you've got Jackson Hayes, who, he's been kind of, I was really hyped when the Lakers got Jackson Hayes, but he didn't really produce like how I thought he was going to. And then Dalton. I mean, Dalton for me was probably the best pick in the draft. I wanted the Thunder to get Dalton so bad. I mean, he fell. Like, he kept falling and falling and falling.
Age.
I mean, that was
I heard it's because of his age.
Yeah, it is because of his age. I mean, he's from Tennessee. He's probably like around 23, 24, somewhere around there. Yeah. The big thing here is going to be like, obviously their development going forward. I know they also have Jalen Hood too. He's pretty decent as well. They've got a lot of guards. I feel like I remember like just hearing some stuff about like potential trades with D'Angelo Russell and things like that, and anything that they can pull in from him. But I really feel like this Laker team just needs one full year to just get the chemistry together. They need to keep everyone healthy. They have those guys that are like a little bit older, but you know that they've produced, like Christian Wood. Christian Wood was an absolute menace.
I expect him to come into LA, and even if he wasn't like the going to be the number one guy off the bench or whatever, but I expected him to be a lot better. Did not shoot well from the three. There was moments where I wanted him to get in the game just because of his spacing ability, you know, if he's shooting a shot and stuff like that. But it just, I have no idea what the rotation is with him.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing too. Like, I mean, like they have like Christian Wood, they have Gabe Vincent, who was kind of a G there for a second. They've got Rui Hachimura, obviously. They've got Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, like they have the team. They have those guys. They have the young pieces. They have Austin Reeves. They have Cam Reddish, who I thought was really going to excel and take another step this year. And I feel like, and Jared Vanderbilt too. Jared Vanderbilt's pretty decent. I think he's on that Lakers roster as well. Like I said, they have all these guys, and the huge question going forward is who's going to get playing time. Like, really, who's going to get playing time? They've got guys like Jalen Hood. They've got Bronny now. They've got Dalton. They've got Max Christie. That's 4 young guys that, you know, they need minutes to develop. I mean, they're going to need minutes to like get like used to the NBA ball, the game speed, everything like that. But then you have guys like, obviously D'Angelo Russell's going to play, Austin Reeves. You've got Cam Reddish, Christian Wood, Gabe Vincent. You've got even Taurean Prince too. He's a Baylor alumni. You've got Jackson Hayes, you've got Rui, you've got Anthony Davis, you've got Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, it's like almost like I'd say almost their like 100% of their team is like guys that can be in the rotation. There aren't that many guys who like you think off the top of your head, oh, that guy's probably not going to get that much playing time, or he's not really, you know, capable of playing time right now. Like that's not how it is, and it's going to be really weird during the season too, seeing how they manage Bronny. I'm really interested in how they're going to do that, because I know there was a lot of talk about like he does not want to sign a 2-way. Obviously, he's not going to be on a 2-way. He's not going to go down to the G League, which I think would probably be the best case scenario for him right now. But obviously, I get it. I mean, like the name, you know what I mean? And I just like, if they put him in the rotation, where is he going to fit in the rotation? And I know for a fact there's going to be a lot of people who are just going to be mad if he gets rotation minutes and he's not proving himself above guys like Max Christie or Dalton, or like even like Cam Reddish, or like any of their younger guys. There's just going to be a lot of turmoil there. So, but I mean, I know that this next year, I just really hope they stay healthy and everyone just sees the floor.
Yeah, like you said, about the whole chemistry and about getting a young team right. But like this is exactly what OKC did great and exactly what Golden State did wrong. The last couple years since they won a championship, they were trying to prepare for the future while trying to prepare and win now. You know, and you just can't do both. OKC, I mean, you looked at them now. They ended up shipping off most of their best players, and now they went from their best players, their youngest players don't even get minutes, right? Kuminga they had to clear the roster. They need Andrew Wiggins to be so damn awful for him to get minutes, you know, and now he's shown what he can do. And then other guys like Moses Moody, another guy who just didn't get enough opportunity, you know. So, and then now you have a couple good guys who are doing good, a couple picks they had this year. I forget the guard who came out of Santa Clara. But again, the Lakers have this opportunity to prepare for the future, right? And you talk about not wanting to trade picks. Rob Pelinka says he doesn't want to trade the future no more to get a superstar, and that's fine. But, I mean, we're in a situation where if you want to keep LeBron around, where all he wants to do is compete, it's going to hurt the development of these other guys, right? And specifically when you talk about Bronny, right, I don't expect Bronny to get – I know he said he doesn't want to play in the G League, things like that, right? But he's going to have to, right? You're going to have to play somewhere. You really get to have a full, healthy 1 year in college, right, with the heart issues, right? So this is, I mean, look exactly what happened for OKC. You had a bunch of young guys and you just let them play. You were bad for a couple of years, sure, but now look how deep you are. You have Chet Holmgren, J-Dub, and SGA, right? SGA is still what, 27, 28, right? So, and then you have all these young pieces around them, the young core that you just built over the years with draft picks, right? So again, I think that you just have to commit to being one or the other, right? And JJ Redick has spoken about if the goal is to win now, I'm here, I'm locked in, ready to win a championship. I want Dalton Kennedy. I want to be surrounded by shooters, Austin Reeves, these guys. But if we're going to prepare for the future, I'm going to focus my time on preparing these younger guys, Jaden Ushafino, and then also Max Christie, another guy who has shown a lot of potential, a lot of flashes, and capability of being a very good 3-and-D player, right? But they need, like you said, they need minutes. And I just don't know what direction we're going in, because right now we're sitting in both. We're trying to win now. We're trying to build the future up, right? But again, like you said, you cannot build the future if you're not allowing them to play and make mistakes and learn and develop their game in the NBA, right? Specifically with Jaden Ushafino, people were talking about him. They didn't like when the moments he did come into the game off the bench for the Lakers because he did not look very good, right? But, I mean, first of all, that was his first week of actual real NBA competition, right? And, so he didn't get much time to spend in the G League because everything was about winning now, right? He didn't look very good, so they brought in guys like Spencer Dinwiddie and all these, and obviously re-signed D'Lo, right? A guy who played phenomenal. But, so it's just, we're trying to do too much at once, At the end of the day, you have to commit to one or the other. The Brooklyn Nets, they were like, oh, we want some superstars here. Mikal Bridges is our guy. Boom. They realized it's not going to happen this way. We need to rebuild our team, re-sign Nick Claxton because he's a very good center, and then everything else, ship everybody off picks. And now we're getting picks, and we're just going to rebuild. Like OKC now, 5 first-round picks next year, and they're competing for a championship. That's the best situation possible. And I understand it's going to be it's a awkward thing to do in LA, right? You hear a lot of people talk about it. You just can't be bad in LA, right? You can't be bad in LA with how much interest and how much people talk about you. The Lakers, LeBron James, the history of the Los Angeles Lakers is just something you could never go in there and just completely rebuild. But so if the option is to compete, then who cares about the first 2-round picks? If we get rid of our first 2-round pick, it's going to happen eventually, right? You're going to eventually hit a point where your guys are old, your guys are no longer winning, and then you have no future, right? It's going to happen eventually with how much you invest in winning now. But at the end of the day, I just think you can't be in 2 places at once. You have to commit to one, whether it's the future and developing young guys who I'm a fan of. I want to go that new direction, right? I think I've seen enough of, again, I love Anthony Davis. I don't love LeBron, but I respect LeBron for what he's done. But if we don't re-sign LeBron, he goes somewhere else, and we ship AD for picks and some young players, I am on board. I am 100% okay. We just have to commit one way or the other.
And I completely agree. I mean, it's going to be they need to identify themselves. I feel like they kind of need to define themselves for this upcoming season. I mean, I'm just going to be excited to watch. Just the West in general, like I said before, and also JJ Redick too. I'm kind of hyped about that. I know JJ Redick's he's a pretty knowledgeable guy, and obviously as a guy that's played in the NBA, and like I've seen a lot of his takes on ESPN as just an analyst in general. I feel like he's a pretty smart guy, and he's got his head on straight. So I'll be excited to watch them. I know that he's kind of brand new; he doesn't really know much about head coaching, but I mean, he'll be a lot better than the other guy that was there. I don't even remember his name.
Ham.
Yeah, Darvin Ham. Yeah, I remember watching a video of him just like with a clipboard and just like trying to figure out where he was putting guys on the floor during a timeout, and everyone was just staring at him awkwardly. So yeah, I feel like JJ's going to. I feel like this is going to be another kind of like half LeBron, half JJ Redick sort of thing. But JJ's going to give a lot of really good pointers throughout the season, and I think he'll fit in pretty well. And I know that he'll be one of those guys where it's pretty easy to get around. It's pretty easy to have his back as a player, especially if he's as relatable as he seems to be.
And then even talking about you have 3 guys who could really shoot, right? Julian Prince has his moments. When he's hot, right? But so you have 3. I mean, Austin Reeves, 38% from 3 in his career, 37. Dalton Kennett, 40% in college, right? And then you have Max Christie averaging 37.5 from 3 in his career as a Laker. Those are just guys. And then Max Christie can defend, right? Dalton Kennett and Austin Reeves not so much best on the defensive side of things, but that's why we have AD. That's why we have a guy who's going to anchor our defense and help, play that help defense like he does, and that's why he's one of the best defenders in basketball. But I mean, we have a couple guys who can be the shooters that we need to surround LeBron, right? But we just need to give them opportunities to do that, right? Like, you can't give them a month of basketball and let's just say Gold Connect goes out there and just shoots terribly from three for the first month of his career. Again, I understand he's 23, but not everybody can be great their first, step into the NBA. So I just think there needs to be, like you said, time to address the issues and allow these players to just play it out. And I know we're probably not going to look like a 60-win team, 55-win team, but all we need to do, at least from my standard and how I feel about LeBron James and AD, is we just got to get there, right? We just got to make it to the playoffs or play in. I don't care about who we play or where we're seated on. I don't care about going on the road, none of that stuff, right? Just got to make the dance, and once you get there, you have an opportunity to do everything. I mean, look at Luka. He went as a 5 seed. He played basically every game in that entire playoff run on the road, So stuff like that doesn't bother me. But again, we obviously have to pick a direction that we're going. But one team I did want to discuss is obviously Detroit Pistons, which I'm a fan of. They're my number 2 team, right? I'm a big Cade Cunningham guy. Okay. I mean, Cade Cunningham, the Detroit Pistons just drafted Ron Holland, who was regarded as one of the best prospects in this draft a year ago. Obviously, with his shooting issues, he did not. He dropped a little bit in the standings and in the prospect in the mock drafts and things like that. But Detroit picked him earlier than most people expected. But they did just sign Tobias Harris for a 2-year deal. I'm not sure the actual number on that, but I do know it's a 2-year deal. But what are your thoughts? Before I get into it, I'm going to rant about Cade Cunningham, but what are your thoughts? You watch Detroit?
I don't. I'll be honest. I don't watch Detroit. No, but I am a big fan of. There's a couple of guys that I really like on Detroit. Obviously Cade Cunningham, I'm a big fan of. I love Jalen Duren. I think Jalen Duren is going to be so good coming up. He was literally 19 last year. He's 20 now. He's going to be so good. Jaden Ivey too. Jaden Ivey's really, really tough. He's going to, and they also got Tim Hardaway Jr. too, which was a big addition. Yeah. And then obviously they have, Isaiah Stewart, who's pretty decent. They've got a log jam at center. They've got Jalen Duren. They have James Wiseman. They've even got Isaiah Stewart too, who's pretty decent with minutes. They've got Azur Thompson, who's also another guy too. But the huge thing to me is I feel like the young talent's there. They have the talent. They have the young guys now. They got their potential. They have 2 forwards in Ron Holland and Azur Thompson, who those are their 2 guys going forward. Those are their 2 high first round picks. They've got Cade Cunningham, number 1 overall guy. That's going to be their superstar. That's going to be the guy that they're going to, lean on. And then you've got Jalen Duren, who's going to be your franchise center. Like, that's the center.
I love Jalen Duren too. It's a double machine.
Yeah. And so going forward, the only real questions would be like the guys coming off the bench, Hardaway is probably going to slip into that forward spot as well. I'm going to guess that they're probably going to end up starting. I know they also have Troy Brown as well. I'm going to guess they're going to start, or maybe they go double center. Maybe they put Wiseman at the power forward. I don't know, because they have, smaller guards. Ron Holland himself, I think he's for a guard, he's for a forward, he's 6'6", 6'7", something like that. 6'7", and then Tim Hardaway is 6'5", so they're not too big there. The main thing I think for them is just the coaching.
That's what I say. They just signed JD Bickerstaff, Bickerstaff, formerly coached in Cleveland, which I think is
it's going to be the coaching. I feel like a lot. This team that they have here is very, very relatable to the Rockets team that had Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green when they were younger. I feel like last year they were so bad. They were horrid. It sucks that they didn't even get the first overall pick. And
that's 2 years in a row. That's so bad.
I couldn't imagine. That was just sad.
2 years in a row like that.
That Rockets team that had Jalen Green and it had Kevin Porter Jr. when Jalen Green was younger, and they were letting Jalen and Kevin Porter shoot 40 shots a game, and they were just kind of doing whatever they wanted to. And they had Chris Paul, and then Chris Paul had stuff to say about it. He was talking about how undercoached this team was and how no one cared about winning and how none of this would really fly on a real NBA team. I feel like that was like the Pistons last year. I feel like, I mean, their coaching wasn't there. And I mean, like, they had a lot of games too where it was just bad luck. Like they were just competing, but they just like lost at the end. I remember there was I forgot what team they were playing. I think it was the Knicks, but there was like that one really, really horrible call at the end of the game where their head coach, I forgot the Pistons head coach at the time, but he talked about how the refs were so bad and how like one of the calls cost them the game and stuff. And I saw that. But yeah, I feel like this team, there's a lot of potential here. It's going to be exciting seeing them this next season. Obviously, they've got their guards are probably going to be Cade and Jaden. That's going to be really exciting to see. I mean, I've seen Jaden drop 30 plus, and I mean, Cade's almost a walking triple double too. And him coming off, him being healthy is going to be huge. And then they've got Ron Holland, who, yeah, like you said before the draft hype, coming up to the draft, before he even played a game in the G League, he was literally the consensus #1 overall pick. Him and Modis Buzelis were like top 2. Right. Like everyone was like going to say that they're, and I mean, them playing on, I mean, that G League team, that Ignite team was absolutely horrid. I think they won like 2 games and lost like 30 something. But I mean,
they were garbage.
I don't know a lot about how like that team was coached, the spacing or like the minutes or how they kind of like distributed that amongst Montes and Ron Holland. But I mean, Ron Holland's great. And he's still a teenager. He's only 18, man, which is crazy. And so Ron Holland's going to slide into that forward spot for them. They're going to have Cade, Jaden, Ron Holland. They're going to have Jalen Duren at the 5. And then whoever they slide in as the other forward, it could be Tim Hardaway Jr. They still have, I mean, Taj Gibson, he's like 40 years old. I don't know how he's still in the league. They've got, I mean, Isaiah Stewart. They can run like forward. They can run double centers if they wanted to with James Wiseman. They can throw in Isaiah Stewart in there. They have Mitu. They have Troy Brown, obviously, as well. And then they have, I mean, Malachi Flynn, who dropped the most random 50 piece.
Yeah, I saw that. Season. I was watching that game when it happened. It was just out of nowhere, dude. Cade Cunningham wasn't playing that game, and then all of a sudden the dude just goes nuclear. I was like, wow, absolutely insane.
Yeah, and then they also have Fournier off the bench too. He's been there a while. Yeah. So I mean, we'll see. But I mean, like they're not looking too bad. I mean, we'll see. It's just going to come down to the coaching. I'm really happy they added a new coach, and we'll see how he kind of pushes them forward and how they kind of, you know, mesh together as a team and what they kind of identify themselves with as a team, because it'll be exciting to see them.
Yeah, and then about JB Bickerstaff, right? Obviously coming from Cleveland, one of the biggest things I think for him that will benefit for the Pistons is that defense, right? I mean, that defense was bottom 5 last year. You know, you just didn't have the coaching behind it. You didn't have no sort of defensive scheme, right? And from a lot of the reports I've heard is that they just didn't. Monty Williams, who was the previous head coach, who just got fired, right? But he just didn't do anything to benefit the younger guys. You know, like, he was just making it too complex. He was making it too difficult for some of these young guys who are just coming into the league and are trying to, you know, you got to make it as simple as possible for them, you know. That way you can build some confidence, and the more you learn, the more complex the defense can get and things like that. But, I mean, JB Bickerstaff had a top 5, top 8 defense year in and year out in Cleveland when you have 2 small guards like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. So I expect them to be there defensively this year. At least, you know, and then offensively, there still is some questions, right? I mean, I'm a big Cade Cunningham fan, right? So I think he has the talent to be a top 20 player. Like, I truly believe that. Like you said, a walking triple-double, excellent playmaker. He averaged 8 assists last year, and he was absolutely, I mean, he had some of the worst spacing in the NBA. The worst spacing in the NBA, you know? And I know Ron Holland won't specifically fix that issue. That was the one reason why he was sliding a little bit, was that 3-point shot, right? But I do think the likes of Troy Brown can get some real PT this year. Simone and Tekio, who him and Cade on the court together, their plus-minus rating was ridiculous, right? I don't remember the exact number, but there are some pieces. And Isaiah Stewart, another guy who's a great 3-and-D guy, went out here. I forget who they picked up. They traded for Wendell Moore, who's somebody who wasn't getting any PT in Minnesota, right? Who was a 3-and-D wing as well. So we'll definitely see how this goes. And obviously adding Tim Hardaway Jr., just somebody who can shoot for you. Tobias Harris, another guy who can just take the offensive load off Cade's hand, right? Somebody else to go get some shots up. And for Tobias Harris, it's kind of like you can come out here and just play how you want to play, you know. Everything you wanted to do in Philadelphia, you could still do it here, you know. Probably get a couple extra touches, a couple extra buckets and things like that. But, I mean, for Cade Cunningham, this is, I hear a lot of people putting a lot of pressure on his plate. I mean, just got a 5-year rookie max extension for $250 million, right? So a lot of people are questioning his ability as a player, because if you look at Cade Cunningham's overall numbers, you see 35% from 3, you see an inefficient 30 41% from the field, right? But that doesn't really truly tell his true skill and capabilities, right? Last year, post All-Star break, his efficiency went up to he was shooting 49% from the field, 37% from three, which is great. Again, you are in one of the worst spacing teams in the league, right? And one of the biggest things that if you didn't watch Detroit Pistons basketball daily, you weren't going to understand is that you played against the Detroit Pistons. You just threw two or three bodies at Cade Cunningham every time he touched the ball, and that was it. Like the Raptors in particular did that. They just want him to threw two or three bodies at him and just let anybody else on that team shoot, and nobody else is going to make you pay, right? So again, I do think another year to develop these younger guys. Jalen Duren gets another year, another offseason to get better. Jaden Ivey hopefully can consistently shoot that three ball, and him and Cade can be a great duo alongside each other. Hopefully, Asar Thompson can bring some sort of offense, alongside that defense. But he is, at the end of the day, at his worst, a double-double and an elite perimeter defender, right? Elite defender that can give you 10 rebounds a game, which is great for a win, And then Ron Holland, a guy who maybe he's not going to be able to shoot the three as well, but he could still give you 15 points off the bench, or if he's in the starting lineup, he could still be alongside you, be a scoring threat. So I do like the direction this team is going, and you can't get any worse than 14 wins. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't. You pray you don't get worse. And like you said, there was a lot of bad beats last year where you have a lead and you just couldn't get it done, or Cade Cunningham hits a game-winning shot, but he does it a second too early, and somebody else comes down and hits a dagger. So there was a lot of unfortunate situations for Detroit. But I'm praying for. Listen, the Red Wings are garbage. Detroit Tigers are okay, right? The Pistons are garbage. The Lions are good. So I pray the Pistons get better, because for the city of Detroit, they just need some more. You know what I'm saying? I know the Lions got good, but they just need some more. And if they come out here and win 30 games, I'll be happy. I'll be impressed with that type of leap. So again, and then is there anything in particular you want to talk about?
The only thing I'd love to touch on is just that Chris Paul signing from the Spurs. I feel like the huge thing a lot of people don't realize is I see what the Spurs are doing. So Chris Paul, this is really, really similar to the Thunder Chris Paul, kind of the role that Chris Paul had on the Thunder when they made that during the bubble, when they miraculously kind of made the playoffs with a very, very young SGA and Danilo Gallinari. And the huge thing for the Spurs, like coming up, they're going to be a huge sleeper team. I don't think people understand how good they have the potential of being. They just drafted Stephen Castle. He's an absolute menace. I think that Chris Paul on the Warriors, it didn't really amount to nothing. There wasn't really anything there. I don't think there was a role for him there either, kind of just going in. But they've got Stephen Castle, who's kind of one of those younger guys coming in from the draft, and also Johnny Furphy as well. Chris Paul's going to be that guy to mentor them, just like he did SGA. If you look, I like, you obviously can't tell the intangibles behind that, but Chris Paul coming in and teaching SGA and them kind of building that chemistry, and SGA just absolutely leveling up after Chris Paul left the team and just absolutely just jumping out of nowhere.
Yeah, I feel jumped to a star level player. When they were terrible, god awful, and people questioned whether he was that good because he had so many shots or because he was that good. Now, I've been saying this even when they were god awful. That first year, we kind of started breaking out that 24 points per game range, right? They had just signed him, and I said, this guy is just that good. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
The Spurs are riddled with guards with talent. They've got Stephen Castle now. They've got Johnny Furphy. They've got Keldon Johnson, who's kind of a forward guard hybrid, who's obviously had his moments. They've got Blake Wesley, who's pretty decent. They've got Devontae Graham. They've also got Malachi Branham as well, who's kind of more of a forward-ish. But they have Devin Vassell, who has that potential as well. So bringing in a veteran, bringing in a guy like Chris Paul, it's going to elevate everyone else's game. Chris Paul is one of those guys that he comes in, and even if he doesn't produce, he's helping everybody else produce around him. And it's going to be huge for Wemby too. I feel like Chris Paul, I think they'll probably put him in the starting lineup. I don't think he doesn't start on this team. Yeah. And just the ability, the pick and rolls with Victor are going to be crazy. He's obviously going to, he's going to give him all the knowledge that he knows. I think anyone who plays around Victor would give him any sort of help that they possibly can. I mean, it's probably going to be a privilege for anyone to play with Victor coming up soon. This next season for Victor is going to be absolutely crazy. I mean, he got snubbed for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, I don't know why Rudy won it. Like, I think Victor would have won it, even if he's a rookie. And like, there might be like some unwritten rule somewhere where a rookie can't win defensive.
It's because their defense the rating was so low. But like, you've seen him play and what he did, his numbers, his 5x5s that he had, like insane.
I mean, the Spurs, they have some really good corner pieces. I mean, Sohan, he's had his moments. Victor, I mean, he's obviously going to be a top probably 3 NBA player coming up within the next few years. Victor, Stephen Castle, Johnny Furphy. They have Keldon Johnson, who's decent. They have Devin Vassell, who's really good too, who can get you 20 any other given night. They've got Sohan as well, who's got a bright future. And then they've got key role pieces, kind of like Devontae Graham and Malachi Branham. And then they've got guys like, Trey Jones as well, I think, is on the team. But yeah, I mean, guys like Julian Champagne, whatever, the guys that they had starting last year, he's not going to touch the floor. And then obviously with a guy like Greg Popovich as your head coach, I mean, it's going to be exciting just watching them play. And I feel like the Spurs are going to be a very underrated team going into the year. And I mean, like, the West is going to be so stacked. They might be one of those teams that sneaks into the playoffs and like as a play-in team, or maybe like the last seed and then makes a little bit of a run. I mean, Victor just impacts the game so crazy. It's, and you have like a Hall of Fame coach like Greg Popovich, where like, if you give them the chance, if you give them the open space, they're going to run for it. And they also might be one of those teams too, where like when it comes down to crunch time and like the end of the season, there's going to be a lot of teams who are fighting for playoff spots. And even if the Spurs don't even have like a chance to get in, they're going to be one of those teams that upsets a lot of teams going down the stretch.
Like they did to Denver, causing Denver not to win the 1 seed or the 2 seed.
Yeah.
But I 100% agree. What Chris Paul did in OKC for that team, especially when he left and the trajectory that they went on, you identified a couple great pieces. Obviously, SGA, Lou Dort was still there. I'm not too particular who else was there, but he helped push them in that direction, And one of the biggest issues with Victor Wembanyama this year and that Spurs team was that the Spurs was just like, it was Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Shohan. These guys were just trying to kind of, get themselves a bucket at the end of the day, right? That's what they were trying to do. They weren't looking to play make. And like, I feel like Wemby was their best playmaker in that starting lineup. Trey Jones, another guy, he may be a shooting liability, a scoring liability on offense, but he was one of the only guys to truly play make for Victor Wembanyama and to get him some easy buckets and to hit him, and then him and Vic on that pick and roll, giving them easy buckets, helping him out. But I think Chris Paul is just going to be a guy that he's going to set the tone and let everybody understand, listen, Victor Wembanyama is our best player. We need to get this guy going early. We need to get this guy going down the stretch late. The other team goes on an 8-0 run, get him involved right here. And I think Chris Paul will be the guy that will allow Victor to truly blossom on the offensive end. Because I think there was a lot of missed opportunities for him offensively, whether it's he's backdoor cutting or he's in transition and nobody's looking down the court to pass it to him. So I think a guy like Chris Paul is going to elevate his offensive ability. And then defensively, like you said, he's already should have been Defensive Player of the Year. Like how I do expect him to get better, right? Don't get twisted. He's only a rookie, but what we've seen from him defensively is otherworldly. Again, Defensive Player of the Year possibly this year if everything stays healthy. Obviously, him being so big, we do pray that he just stays healthy throughout his entire career, because this would be great for the league. But again, I also do agree. Anything Greg Popovich does, I support him, because he's not only earned that right through what he's done, but he's developed players out of nowhere. This guy had Derek White and DeJounte Murray both, right, in a poor Spurs team, but, he had developed some great players, and they turned out to be worth a lot of picks, and that's exactly what allowed him to get Victor Wembanyama in the first place, right? So I do expect these guys to blossom with Chris Paul having finally a true point guard, even like Devin Vassell, a guy who can now get some open looks, that he doesn't have to create for himself. Keldon Johnson, a guy who before they had Vic, at one point was averaging 21 points per game before that first All-Star break, right? So I expect him to benefit from alongside a true point guard, right? Even if Chris Paul goes out there and gives you 2 points and 12 assists a game, that's what you need for a 1 year middle level exception deal, just to get these young guys in the flow of the NBA to help improve the offense, right? And Chris Paul's not going to be a defensive liability. Sure, he's not prime Chris Paul, but he'll still give you something on defense. So I do expect Victor Wembanyama to have a crazy leap, maybe looking at 24, 25 points per game, especially with the shooting percentages he had last year. I think those would definitely go up. That second half post All-Star break, that's when he actually went on a tear. This team bumped up like 6 net ratings defensively and offensively as well. They took the biggest jump post All-Star break, so I do expect big things for this team ahead. I still would like to see them, if possible, trade for a point guard, whether it's not this year or next year. I would still like you to trade for a guy like Darius Garland if it doesn't work out. Trae Young, if he's on the block, I would definitely invest in him, in the future, just because I still think you could use a guy like that, a star-powered point guard, and specifically with those two small guard type players, in Trae Young and Darius Garland. The reason I wouldn't be worried about them defensively in the future is obviously Victor Wembanyama is such a freak defensively that he can make up for all that stuff, and he can help those guys and cut out all their weak points on defense. But anything else you'd like to talk about before we cut off for today?
No, I think we did pretty well covering a lot of really great things today.
Yeah. Again, I want to appreciate you for coming on today. Appreciate you for taking the time out today to come on. But with that being said, hopefully y'all like today's episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. If you like us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, like and follow the show. Give it a 5-star rating. It helps improve the algorithm. And if you enjoy the content, make sure to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell a friend. We out.